Here we go. Special edition caught stealing. Matt, it's only been a couple of days since we've last talked, but too much stuff has happened. We all know a lot of fantasy baseball drafts are probably happening this weekend as well as probably next weekend. Next weekend potentially probably being the most drafted weekend, but definitely want to talk a little bit about some of these injuries. So let's just start with this. Let's get right into it just because we talked about it on Monday's pod, which if you haven't listened to that yet, go listen to it. We seem to have avoided a scare with Ronald Acuna. So within this, I don't even know if it was about 24 hours of question about what was going to happen with him. If you were able to scoop up Acuna at 2 or 3, you have to be ecstatic.
Yeah, you got some major value there in the maybe 18-hour drafting window in which we didn't know what happened, because apparently even though Taylor Swift can make it from Tokyo to Vegas for a Super Bowl in, I don't know, 14 hours, news of medical tests can't make it from LA to Atlanta in one day because of time zones, I guess. I don't know. No major injury to Acuna. He's just going to kind of chill, take a little while to get back into baseball activities, which fair, doesn't really need the practice, and should be ready for opening day. So he's your 1.1. I got into this debate like we did on the pod. I got into this debate on Twitter about, in the height of the Acuna injury crisis, people were like, I'm not taking him number 1. I'm like, if he puts up 35-30, he's still number 1. And somebody was like, he's not getting that. And I said, he put up 29 steals in the year he came back from the ACL in 119 games. So what aren't we getting here? So yeah, you are safe to resume drafting Ronald Acuna number 1, and don't even think about it.
One pitcher that probably wasn't too high on many draft boards anyway, but was probably going to be a popular bounce back candidate in the later rounds. Actually, he'd be a popular bounce back candidate for the later rounds, was going to be Lucas Giolito, but he now has, if I remember it correctly, it's a partially torn UCL. His 2024 season and a forearm strain. So his season is in jeopardy. He was someone that you were getting in the later rounds anyway, and he was probably, if we're going to be honest, was someone you drafted late. If he had a rough 3 starts to begin the year, you were probably cutting him anyway because homers were an issue last year. If he wasn't going to get the home run issues rectified in Fenway, he was going to get bludgeoned this year. Now, you never want to see somebody go down, but his fantasy appeal for me, he's completely off my draft board. Too many questions, just not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. I watched the Red Sox broadcast of their spring training game yesterday. This was on Tuesday when the news broke about Giolito, and the only thing they were bemoaning was the fact that now they have an innings hole in their rotation. They didn't talk about the ratio because you can't. They didn't talk about strikeout numbers because you can make those up. They talked about the fact that for the last 5 years, which is true, Giolito has been a workhorse and has gone about 168 plus innings, I think, each of the last 5 years. It's been between like 170 and 180 consistently the last 5 years. So they were bemoaning that. They were not bemoaning the actual numbers he accrued in those innings because they weren't good to begin with. If he couldn't get it sorted out in the AL Central for most of the year, and then the terrible half of the AL West last year, you really think he's going to sort it out in the AL East? I don't think so. So nothing's official yet. Passan has the partially torn UCL and forearm strain. Probably pretty good bet that that's accurate. But they have not announced officially that he's undergoing surgery. He probably just should, because then for the Red Sox sake, on a 2-year deal, you get him back for most of the second year. I don't know if it matters for fantasy for next year, though, to be honest.
Fair enough. I think it'll be a similar story. And now we just have the injury questions kind of coming into it with him again for 2025. So one thing it will do, I will say this, though, it makes Garrett Whitlock a little more appealing because I don't think I have a question about his role to begin the year now. I think I'm pretty confident I know where he's going to be.
Yeah, same with Tanner Houck. I think Houck and Whitlock are both in the rotation. I think they were vying for one spot before, and I think they're both there now. You might see Josh Wisnowski, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. get some time there too. Cutter Crawford's going to have to step up because he's going to be a bigger name there. And now you've got the ace, as I put this in quotations for those who aren't watching on YouTube, is Nick Pivetta.
Yep.
And I don't think the Red Sox are going to go out and get anybody. Everybody who wants them to go sign Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell, if they wanted to do that, they would have already done that. It's not like they were one injury away from, oh, now we need to fill a rotation. They had question marks all offseason, and they traded Chris Sale. So I think their direction is quite firm at this point.
I would agree. Another pitcher this one's actually like Giolito is going to open the year on the IL, but unlike Giolito, I feel very confident we'll see him at some point. Justin Verlander is going to open the year on the injured list. The team made it clear that he did not suffer a setback, but he's just not going to be ready. If you checked out the Fantasy Alarm, Fantasy Baseball Draft Guide, I was in on Verlander being a bust this year to begin with. I'm not victory lapping it at all. The injury is what it is. You can't victory lap an injury. But I will say now, I was already a little bit down on him on a per inning basis. And now the longtime workhorse may not get workhorse type innings this year. So if we're going to say, I'm no mathematician, but if we're going to get less innings from Verlander than we used to get, we're going to get a little bit of a decrease in value on a per inning basis. We take that equals. I'm a little bit down on his fantasy value this year. If you go over to the NFBC, let me do a live representation of his ADP. It's going down. He is becoming more affordable in drafts. It's not worth it to me. Right now, let me see what parameters I have it set in here for. Let's just do a calendar month from the time that we're recording this. So dating back to February 6th, Verlander pick 146 on average. Little rich for me. When you look at guys around him like Bailey Ober, I'd rather have him. I'd rather take Merrill Kelly. Call me a sucker for Driveline. Probably go with Shane Bieber. Then you get like Jordan Montgomery, Mitch Keller, Gavin Williams. Verlander's falling down boards for me. I was already a bust. He was already a bust for me to begin with.
Right. So I guess the debate here, they called it a hiccup. They didn't call it a setback. They called it a hiccup, and I don't know.
Those are darn synonyms.
I don't know why shoulders get hiccups. That seems like something that should be looked into. Hiccups are supposed to come out your throat and your mouth.
Yep.
But he's also 41 at this point, 40 years old.
Old
at this point. The guy has been a stud for a while, but you said 146
on average,
right?
Yes.
On average for the last month, you're drafting ceiling. Mm-hmm. You're not drafting floor. With the other guys, Merrill Kelly's probably one of the exceptions where you're kind of closer to ceiling than floor. But Gavin Williams, you're certainly closer to floor. Shane Bieber, you're probably in between, depending on what happens with increased velo and if he does get traded, because there's been those rumors for like a year and a half, right? You said who else was Tanner Bybee in that group?
I did not say him, but he's only about 25 picks ahead of him, so about 2 rounds earlier.
Right. So there was somebody else that you also mentioned in that group that I feel like you're drafting at upside, like you're drafting for upside and he can deliver. You're not drafting ceiling.
Bailey Ober.
Yeah, there you go.
Or are we talking about the NL Cy Young Mitch Keller? Was it him? I mentioned him too.
The guy who signed for $77 million in Pittsburgh. Probably more ceiling for Mitch Keller.
Yeah, I hear you.
Sorry, Colbs. But yeah, Bailey Ober is probably in between. But a lot of those guys, you're closer to floor than ceiling. Verlander, you're absolutely at the ceiling there. And no, Houston's not making a move for a starter. Their GM came out and said, "Here's our rotation." If you see my Twitter, I'm pretty sure I reposted it. They feel pretty good about the depth they have.
Every injury we've talked about here, I've kind of, other than Acuna, I've basically been like, yep, they're moving down draft boards. The one injury here, and it's not necessarily the one, there might be another one a little bit later, but the Sonny Gray hamstring injury, if he's going to slip a little bit in drafts, I'm going to buy the dip because I am far less scared of a hamstring injury for a pitcher than I don't know, a shoulder that is
Yeah,
hiccups apparently. That's
that
just
seems
completely
vital
off
to throwing
my
the
board.
ball.
And sure, you think about it, it is his right hamstring, so that is his push leg as a righty. So there's going to be a little bit there. But even think about it this way: if I'm going to over exaggerate here, even if they want him off of his legs, not doing anything, he can sit in a chair, he can throw, he can still do the bands, he can still keep the arm relatively in better shape,
Right, you
and
could
while he
even do
rehabs the lower
flat.
half.
You could even do flat ground throwing because it takes
Mhm.
less pushing on your hamstring than thing. As a as a fellow baseball writer of mine pointed out yesterday, Sonny Gray is good for missing a month of any given
Mm.
season. At least he's getting it out of the way early this time.
Yep.
It's like, that's fair.
Yep.
I'll take it if he not saying he's going to miss a month, but he's certainly going to miss a little bit of time here because anytime you cut into spring training, you're reducing the warm up, which means they need more time to get innings before they go full go in games in the regular season. So, probably a little bit of a later start for Sonny Gray. But I'm with you. It's not. I'll take the value and the dip in ADP or on.
Yeah. From count dating back a month, he was picked 124. That's a little rich for me, but if the injury is going to push him back, like in recent drafts, he's actually fallen a little bit. Like some of the recent ones that I'm seeing here in NFBC, like 170s, 180s. I'm in on that.
Yeah.
I will gladly take that dip with Sonny Gray. All right, Matt. This is the one I'm funny. This is the funny one I'm really interested in. I'm not even going to preface this at all. I'm going to let you go for it. Shane Baz, former Pittsburgh great, injured. Tell me about it.
As somebody on Twitter pointed out, is he even real at this point? As far as I understand it, he was lifting weights, right?
Tweaked his oblique, picking up a weight.
Yeah, tweaked his oblique, picking up a weight. That is the definition of a spring training injury. Outside of the time that the Arizona Diamondbacks coach got bit or stung by a scorpion because his wife thought it was a spider crawling across the floor, so he went to go nab it and missed and got stung by a scorpion. That's the most spring training injury ever. I don't know, man. Shane Baz is going to be delayed about a month. Is the report that I've heard?
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, I have him in a dynasty league. I'm clearly keeping him. I'm not letting him go because he's still young. He's still got ace quality stuff. But these Tampa Bay Rays pitchers just keep finding weird ways to hurt themselves, and I don't know. That
Is he the most? He's like the most hyped and most sought after young arm, and I'm looking here who has like 40 innings at the big league level in his career. Like the hype, and don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for it too.
I don't know. Paul Skenes might be more hyped.
Okay, well, let's go with someone
People
who's
are
actually been around for more than a week.
People are legitimately upset that the Pirates announced that Paul Skenes is going to start in the minors. And I tweeted out,
that was always the plan.
He's got 6 2/3 total pro innings since being drafted. Are we?
Yeah, and
what? Why are we upset about this?
He could end up being this generation's Clayton Kershaw. Pittsburgh will never fast play a prospect.
Yeah,
there was.
Look at how long it took for Mitch Keller to come up. They wasted 2 good years at AAA.
Feasibly, if we're being honest with each other here, what was the actual chance Skenes started the year in the rotation?
0.
Less than 1. I was going to say less than 1. Okay.
I would. Look, I know that I hype some prospects, and I know he's a generational talent, and I have him pretty highly ranked. It's Pittsburgh, man. They're not the Angels who are moving a dude who Nolan Shanuel has more MLB games to his credit than minor league games to his credit, and he was drafted last June. Okay, that's rare.
Yeah.
Paul Skenes trying to go from basically college to pro baseball without really pitching in the minors basically never happens. Like, as hyped as Steven Strasburg was coming out of college as the guaranteed generational, can't miss prospect of that draft, he spent time in the minors, like
Yeah.
a year and
Mhm.
change.
Mhm.
As much as Bryce Harper was hyped and was like on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 16, basically the MLB's version of LeBron James's chosen one, Bryce spent a year in the minors. Like, these guys don't get drafted and come up, except for there was a reliever for the Royals who pitched in the College World Series and then pitched in the World Series the same year. And then he wound up getting traded to, he was a lefty, I think, got traded to Cleveland.
It wasn't like a Finnegan, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the first name though.
Is it Brandon Finnegan?
Oh my god.
I think it was Brandon Finnegan.
I think it is Brandon.
That guy was like the first one to ever do it. I don't see the Pirates doing it with Paul Skenes. And that guy was a reliever who's coming up and pitching like 2 outs a game. This guy's a starter. Not shocking.
Yep.
So, tirade over. But no, Shane Baz is a real human being. He's not a unicorn, and we'll just have to wait a little longer for his oblique to heal.
If you were in drafts and Josh Jung was discounted, you should be feeling pretty good about getting him at a reduced price. Seems like he is working his way back. Not yet running 100%, but you know what? What did he have? 3?
He didn't steal.
1 stolen base last year.
He is a third baseman, man. You don't need him to steal.
I know a third baseman that steals bases. He's MVP candidate for Pittsburgh, and I do believe he actually made the third base positional spotlight article in the Fantasy Baseball Draft Guide. So
I guarantee you.
And I didn't write that article. I didn't even write that one. I didn't write that.
Do we have a sneaky Pirates fan on the staff other than you?
I think Ray. I think Ray wrote it. I'm pretty sure Ray wrote it. And now I'm looking up because I want to make sure I give the right person credit. Because
on Josh Jung, I mean, that offense is potent as all get out. He was a huge part of that offense last year. I'll be fine with it. They're going to slow play him a little bit anyway. It was a long look. The guy was a rookie last year, went to the World Series. It's a long year and then a short off season. They're probably going to give these. I mean, I'm less concerned about him than when Corey Seager comes back.
Yep, you'll be just fine with Josh Jung. And it was actually Ryan Kirksey who wrote the third base positional spotlight. And Brian Hayes is the cover boy as well. So shout out Ryan, and make sure you go get your hands on the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide, especially if you're drafting this weekend. It's got the cheat sheet. That's your one-stop resource, as well as everything you need there. So make sure you get your hands on that. What do you make of in Toronto with seemingly every single pitcher? It's not soreness. It's not pain. It's not an injury. It's just fatigue. It seems like every single pitcher in Toronto is having fatigue. And by every single one, I'm really only talking about 2, with the main one being Kevin Gausman. It's just fatigue. What do we make of the general, broad, vanilla term fatigue at this point?
That they're getting back into the flow of things. I mean,
Yeah.
Toronto was a team that used, I think, the fewest starting pitchers last year of any team. I think they had the most consistent starting rotation in baseball. I believe their broadcast team said on one of the calls. So, look, if you're trotting out guys, I think all 5 of them had like 28 starts or something. If you're trotting out guys every 5th day for an entire season, I'm sure the next year you're going to be a little sore. Like, not a lot of dudes are used to pitching, the whole contingent doing that and getting days off. So I'm not that concerned. If it turns out that it's from an injury and they were just kind of glossing over that or being blasé about it, then I'd be more concerned. But I kind of expect guys to have fatigue at this point in spring. You're just starting to gear back up. It's kind of an early spring training this year and kind of a long one, it feels like. So I'm not that concerned.
And for like Kevin Gausman's sake, like last year, he was a quick starter, 2.3 ERA. So he should be just fine. And he's pitched so long, like, yes, you want to get him ramped up and everything like that. But when you look at Gausman, like, let me go to his regular season here. So like last year, 185, year before 174, 192, and he's made 30 plus starts each of the last 3 seasons. Like, he's not exactly getting younger.
Yeah, he's not a chicken.
He's only 30. I mean, he's still youngish, 33. So like he's okay, but like at some point the mileage does wear up a little bit. And again, they want him ready for the season and everything. They're okay with pushing back his throwing program a couple of days now. He'll be out there opening day. I don't have any concern about
Right. If you
Gausman.
buy it a couple of days time now, it saves you like 2 weeks later in the season.
Exactly. And then staying in the American League East, we have with Baltimore. It sounds like Gunnar Henderson's return is drawing near, which should be good. But one that hurt near and dear to my heart was Cedric Mullins leaving with, I believe it was hamstring. I think they said it was tightness was the word that they used. Mullins is a guy I love. If you don't get stolen bases early, he's falling in this nice little sweet spot where you can get him hoping for a bounce back, especially in the stolen base department. What are your concern? What's your concern level with Cedric Mullins, I should say?
It's a little higher than most. The skill set you're hoping for is speed. Hamstrings have direct relation to speed and reducing the amount of stolen bases. Because if a guy yanks a hammy, you're not gonna the next day you don't want him out there running full tilt to go steal a base. Secondly, Colton Cowser has been lighting up the ball in spring training, and he was already knocking on the door of more playing time, more chance in the major league roster. This opens that door. You have a few other bats who could potentially fill the hole too. Heston Kjerstad comes to mind. Kyle Stowers, sort of, not really. But you can move some guys in that Baltimore lineup around and play them a variety of places. So for Mullins, I'm a little more concerned because any missed time gives Cowser more chance. And they have a pretty good history of relying on their young players there in Baltimore and starting to season them. So that's my concern. He's going late enough in drafts though that it shouldn't really factor in at the spot he's going. But it is something to watch for sure.
It stinks with Mullins too because he had been spending a lot of time as the leadoff hitter, and it was looking like such a good value. I'll still buy the dip. Whatever. If there's going to be a little bit of a dip, I'll take it. Seems like he's day-to-day right now, so we just need a little bit more information there.
Speaking of AL East leadoff guys, Jarren Duran left Tuesday's game early, shaking his surgically repaired foot as he stepped into the box for an at-bat. They said he's okay and should be back in a couple of days, but it's certainly something to watch for a guy who's, last year was a huge breakout year for him. He put everything together, especially in the second half. He's expected to be their leadoff guy, which is anytime you can get a leadoff guy in fantasy, just helps. You get more at bats, you get more run chances. Boston's offense, not terrible if you look at it. So just something to watch there with Jarren Duran.
And then we talked about this a little bit on Monday's pod, but no new news with David Bednar, right lat, still not throwing. But with Pittsburgh getting Aroldis Chapman, right there is your clear step in. So if you're drafting this weekend and saves are a vital part of your scoring format, I would use a late round throw on Aroldis Chapman just in case there's anything with Bednar, get some cheap saves. That's what I would do. Would you approach it any differently? Because at least we've seen with Pittsburgh closers tend to be valuable because when they win, it's not by much.
Correct. Yeah, I've had this theory where you actually want closers on the mediocre offenses. You don't want the closers from the elite offenses because they don't play in very many close games, and if they're not in close games, you're not getting saves. So yeah, the Pirates closer has been quite valuable in 5 of the last 6 years, I'd say, something like that.
It dates back to the Melanson years.
Yeah, Melanson was always a great late round target for saves because nobody pays attention to Pittsburgh, and they're always winning like 3-1, 2-1, or hey, they won a no hitter 1-0.
Elite
2 years ago.
I think it was last year.
Or was it last year?
I think it was last year. Yeah,
they got no hit and won the game 1-0. So
I mean, that's a sign of a true team. A true team that can, everyone's like, you want a team that can win under any circumstance. Well, Pittsburgh was the only one to do it. So there you go.
Literally did not get a hit and still scored a run. So
hey, that's great.
Doesn't happen that often.
That's
it. For a save.
It certainly does not happen. But Matt, we got a couple minutes here. Just want to talk leading into this weekend's drafts. What? How do you toe the line with spring training stats of finding the right opportunity to pounce on a player who's having a hot start to the spring versus just overpaying? Like, for example, Juan Soto is going nuts right now.
Correct.
There's no doubt about it. And drafting him first overall, because that would just not be the right move. Unless your league scoring format is like stolen bases are worth like a quarter of a point.
So last night, on Tuesday night, I was watching, I'm going to shout out Bubba and Bloom. I was watching their podcast, their live stream of the Tout Wars mixed 15-team league draft. They were both in it. They were drafting against each other and on a live stream with each other during the draft. That was an OBP league, and Ryan Bloomfield took Soto 2 overall because it's OBP, and that guy's got a projected like 490 on base percentage.
For sure.
Right? So if it's an OBP league, that more than makes up for 0 steals from, or almost 0 steals from Soto.
Right.
I'm still not sold that the batting average isn't going to see a little bit of a dip going to Yankee Stadium, because it is, in terms of hits, the worst ballpark over the last 3 years for lefty hitters. Power, different story. Hits, worst one. Yeah, we're not going nuts over spring training numbers, right? I've seen Carlos Rodon just got lit up earlier today on Wednesday, gave up a couple of homers in 3 and change innings, only struck out a guy. People are talking about how shaving the beard was his Goliath. I'm not the bigger problem with Rodon is the velo was down. That's a bigger concern with me, is that he only hit like 93 on the fastball. That's not great. So it depends, right? If a guy is like Soto, that's not changing where you're taking him in the draft. He is who we thought he was, right? Guys who continue to struggle. It really only matters to me if they're in position battles, because it gives ammo to the manager to reduce their playing time, right? Reduce their role. It's not gonna, if a guy is in a position battle and is lighting it up, I'm not gonna go, oh well, now he's like top tier shorts, like Geraldo Perdomo, for example. If he was lighting it up at spring training, I'm not gonna all of a sudden think he can start hitting. We have an entire season that shows he's there for his shortstop defense, which is phenomenal, but not great with a bat in his hand. So, that's kind of how I'm viewing pitchers. I want to see pitch mix. I want to see velo. They're coming back from injury or transitioning to a new role. Like, for example, AJ Puck. So far has handled 3 innings. We'll see, who else? Somebody else had control. I was reading up on this.
You're talking about Edward Cabrera?
With the strike rate? Yeah, I think he's hit, 70+% strike rate this year?
Yeah, he's not walking everybody and their mother.
And he was like at 58% in the strike zone last year or something. So, things like that is what I want to see.
I'm going to say exactly what you said in a different way, because I agree.
It took a while to get there.
It's okay. But it applies. So ultimately what it matters for spring training, the hard thing to take into account is that it's usually a small sample size.
Correct.
So think about it this way. A guy's 2 for 10. He's hitting 200. Okay. Not great, right? They have one game where somehow they get 5 at bats. They go 5 for 5. They're now 7 for 15 and almost hitting 500. Has that one day made that much of a difference? Like, yes, in that case, it doubled their batting average and then some. What I look at more from spring training really is like the comparison. So like Rodon, velo down, not a fan. Correct. If pitchers' velos are up, it's interesting. Take a look at Cabrian Hayes. I want him to loft the ball and drive the ball and hit for power. He's making a ton of hard contact this spring. He also did the same thing last year. So buyer beware. But like, those are the things that we're looking at. And like with pitchers, with new pitches, like if Bryce Miller goes out there and gets shelled, okay, he's going to get shelled. But if that new splitter that he threw or worked on, if he threw it 6 times and generates 4 whiffs, I'm looking at that more because I know he can eventually command the fastball. I know he can command the other stuff. These guys that are adding in new pitches, you want to see how they mix it in to the pitch mix. And again, you can't expect a guy like, yeah, you can't just throw a new pitch and go out there and generate 100% whiff rate and it strikes everybody out. Like, you have to work on it.
Shohei did it mid-season last year
Well,
with the cutter that nobody knew he had, and then struck out 8 dudes with it.
fair, but I mean, there's exceptions to the norm, and I think
he is every exception to the norm.
I think we've proven that he is the poster boy to breaking all of those norms. But really, for spring, like you can't just box score surf in spring.
Correct.
Because, like, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure you mentioned Geraldo Perdomo. I am pretty sure he has a rather lackluster quality of contact profile.
Generally, yes. He has not a lot of, like, he has some pop, but it's like, I don't know, 5 to 10 homers a year, maybe. He's mainly there because he's a remarkable defender. Or he's a switch hitter at the bottom of the lineup. And he makes, he can turn the lineup over and get it to Corbin Carroll and whatnot.
Right.
He's not like a world-beating shortstop.
Yeah. Perdomo could go 3 for 3 or 3 bloop singles. And, fantasy MVP or fantasy breakout star Henry Davis could go 0 for 3 with 3 105 plus mile an hour batted balls.
Right.
I know what's going to be better long term.
Right. In fact, yesterday, I was watching the Diamondbacks Padres game. Jock Peterson absolutely smoked the ball off. Like, he barreled that thing up. It sounded like it was gone from the bat. Went to the deepest part of the field and was caught before the warning track in center field.
Mm-hmm.
Eugenio Suarez got a hold of a 92 mile an hour fastball, but it did not sound the same. And because he hit it closer to left field, it went out. But distance-wise, I think Jock's actually traveled farther. So this is why you don't necessarily just box score surf. Also, you don't know who these pitchers are facing.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the O's brought in a new guy, I think Monday or Tuesday, faced Ryan Weathers, not the O's. Ryan Weathers for the Marlins faced the heart of the Astros lineup and looked good. So it's 4 strikeouts. But if you see it's 4 strikeouts against the Astros, you don't know if it was their B squad or the heart of the order. So you still got to, check these things, see who they actually faced. And because a lot of it is AA guys getting their first taste of spring training, AAA guys fighting for spots, or, starting pitchers just working on stuff.
Yeah. And to prove the point too, before we wrap it up, went to Baseball Savant, clicked a random game from yesterday, right? Went to Twins Cardinals from the 5th. Only one of the 7 hardest hit balls in that game went for a hit, and 2 of the 3 softest went for hits in terms of exit velocity. Bloops
still work.
Here, of the top 7 hardest hit balls in that game, the only hit was a home run, but the expected batting average on those balls, 500, 940, 460, 240, 410, and 360. On the 2, there were 3... The 2 singles of the softest hit ones, both were singles, were 51.4 miles per hour and 22.3. Expected batting average on those were 210 and 220. But in that game, guess what? 1 for 1 with a 1,000 batting average. You can't just box score surf, especially in spring training.
Yep.
And we'll leave it at that.
You should legitimately sign up for MLB.TV. It's like $150 for the entire year for every game that's not in your... Now, if you live in Iowa or you live in like Nevada, sorry, not great. You don't get like 6 teams in either of those states. But for me, the only team I don't get to see is the Royals, unfortunately. But you get all the spring training games that are on TV. You can watch them, scout them. You can pay attention because, like I said, had I heard Jock's hit and not be watching the television, I would have thought it was a homer because he smoked it. And then Eugenio, I'm sure the StatCast numbers are not as kind to his, and it went out like halfway up a berm.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. But Matt, we'll leave it at that for this special edition episode of Caught Stealing, just because everything that happens. Want to make sure you're ready for fantasy drafts this weekend. On top of that, give me a follow on X at Colby R. Conway. Give Matt a follow on X at the Selzman. Head over to fantasyalarm.com. If you are drafting this weekend, your fantasy baseball league, your home league, your buddies from college, your neighborhood, your local gym, whatever league you are in, go to fantasyalarm.com, get the fantasy baseball draft guide, use the cheat sheet and all of the great content that we have in there. You will need it for your drafts. And if you go all pro, you can even join the Discord and talk with Matt and I and the other great folks here at Fantasy Alarm directly. We'll be back early next week with your regularly scheduled programming of the Caught Stealing podcast. And I do believe we'll have a special guest in lieu of Matt who gets to go on your preseason vacation here. So you get that. So enjoy the time. There will be a different face sitting over here next week, but we'll be previewing the AL West. So if you want to start thinking about your lineups in our fantasy challenge that we're doing, make sure you do that. But until next time, we'll see you next week with the newest edition of Caught Stealing.